Just gonna have to look at you, James.
Can you see the projector? Quite bright with that window.
Yeah.
Is it all right?
From here.
Okay, so. So, thank you for coming to listen to me. My name is James Allen. I work as senior engineer at the CSP. So I work in the normally work with people we're hearing up the CSP and you're in the southwest and you're worried about any leave entitlement or pay or work, and that's the kind of thing that I do. I'm a physio by background, so I work here about 2.5 years before I joined the CSP. I work predominantly in MSK, and this has been something that I've always kind of been a little bit interested in. And then at the Southwest Network meeting, which took place in June, about HCPC, to look into presenting that. I think that's how. Is that how you found out about this?
Bit of both. So we had a bit of a issue in the department. We had a complaint come through that we realised we called consent round. So we went through that, and Gemma had seen you at the conference and suggest if we got in touch.
Yeah. Ask questions as we go along, because otherwise it'll be a bit boring if I've got questions at the end for you to ask, but it's better if you ask questions, otherwise it'd be me just talking and hearing my own voice. Okay, so, and I was just saying beforehand, I realised that I'm at that age where I actually got my 8-year-old daughter to do the PowerPoint presentation for me, so I wrote it all. I was on the train back from London the other day for the CSP, and I did all the kind of words, and then she just did the animation, because it was like 5:30 one night, and I think I can't do this anymore, and she did about 5 minutes. So I've realised that I've reached kind of tipping point in my life when my children are already better at technology than me. It's quite scary. So she's done all this kind of stuff. Yeah. So we're going to talk about consent. I don't have all the answers, and I mean that because there isn't a definitive answer on this. I can give you lots of information, I can tell you lots about it, but there isn't necessarily this is exactly what you need to do. But I can give you lots of examples about how we get there, where we've got things, what kind of guidelines are in place, and where it is. And it's also really, this is different departments in the CSP. This is a different department who produced a paper on this, which I'll give you a bit more information on nearer the end. But normally, like I say, I step in when it's already gone kind of badly wrong. So normally at the stage where people are doing it, we'd contact a different department if you wanted advice on it. I'll talk a little bit about the HCPC. So HCPC is a fascinating thing that I could talk for hours and hours on, and I'm happy to answer questions on that as well. And then, like I say, just a question and answer session at the end. So consent. So I worked in MSK Physio for a long time, and it's always been something that kind of interests me. And I always kind of, hopefully in a nice way, challenge my colleagues, challenge people when they're coming in to the department about how they record consent. So I've got a few of my favourite ways that I've seen consent recorded. And I should have done this in the other way around, but I don't know if has anyone seen this being done? So has anyone seen that? So the first thing people write on their SOAP notes is SIC for informed consent and tick. So not seen that one? That's a favourite. One of my colleagues writes that every time she writes a set of notes. Now, do you think that patient is given consent? Why not?
They don't know what you're going to do to them.
Yeah.
So, at that stage, you don't know what you're going to do to them.
Yeah. So I think you could say they've possibly consented to being in the cubicle, but have they consented to treatment or anything else? Consent tick, that's another one that always interests me, again, right at the start. And these written down before treatment occurs. So to say before you've done anything, as we said, before you've even assessed them, before they've sat down, the first thing you might have said, I suppose, do you consent to being here? Do you consent to being treated? But actually, are they having informed consent? And actually, I controversially or not, I never really recorded consent. but I'll come on and talk a little bit more about that, about why I did and why I didn't. And I just said, if you've got any other examples, how would you normally do it? So how would you go about it?
Hopefully the consent being to assessment and exercise to manual therapy.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody not recorded out of interest? You want to go admit it? I don't
They used to not when they first came here. I don't know why. They always did on the walls when they came in. I'm getting that now.
But yeah, so we'll go back to what you're doing already at the end and saying whether that is really informed consent or not, and whether they are what that patient is potentially consenting to. So I have put, does it matter? And why I say that is that as you'll come on to see in a minute, it's an issue for departments. It's an issue for how we do things. But actually, the implications and the outcomes are more important than whether you gain consent or not. So, and just to go on, are we under or over concerned with consent? So, is it something that we worry about too much? Do we kind of get into this kind of habit where we think it's really, really important, or is it something that we are, under or over concerned? I don't know what you think about that. Probably you seem like you're relatively aware of it and try and record it as a department. But I don't know. I don't know if anyone's got a view on whether you think that it's over or underdone, or anyone's got any kind of views on it.
Well, I sort of do acupuncture. Well, I
Yeah.
have not done it for a while. So we have written consent.
Yeah.
It's informed consent.
Yeah.
But then we're also told that if it was in a court of law, it would mean nothing.
Who told you if it was an important or it mean nothing?
It was years ago.
Yeah, because I've got a bit on that.
Yeah.
I think, and that's what I'm going to say is, so I'm kind of jumping ahead of where I was going to be, but we'll get there in a bit. But and I just wanted to put in doctors, other HPs, nurses, and how they use consent or not. I think working alongside a doctor for years and years in fracture clinic, he would inject, he would treat, he would put, obviously with fractures, he would put people in casts. Did he ever get informed consent to what he was going to do? No. I don't know. Do any of the doctors you work alongside ever get even asked, saying, "Are you happy for me to do this?" And so it's a funny one that I think we as physios are very aware of it, and it's a really good thing. But actually, other health professions aren't, and are other health professions held up because they haven't got consent? So do you ever hear any claims that are going through that it's around consent? Specifically around consent, or is it because of the outcome that's come out of it? Yeah. Yeah, and I think of there's two things I think of. I went to Clip and Climb a few weeks ago with children, and they get you to sign a consent form, which basically means that whatever happens, it's not their fault. And and I remember as well my appendix burst when I was a physio student, and I remember they literally were just about to operate and they said, "You've got to sign this consent form, and there's a 1 in 5,000 chance you'll die, and sign here." And I was thinking, with both of those, if something had gone wrong with Clip and Climb, that form that I've just signed, if they've done something wrong, if the harness breaks, if the strap that holds me there breaks, that is still their fault. And the fact I've signed that consent form makes absolutely no difference whatsoever. So I just sign it. I don't even bother kind of reading them because I know they're a complete waste of time, because that doesn't protect them. And a bit like with the appendix, if I hadn't have survived, I imagine my family would have said, "Hang on a minute, how come a relatively healthy, long time ago, in the 20s, has not survived a very routine operation?" Would have quizzed them on that, and they wouldn't have been able to say, "Well, he signed the form, therefore tough." And that's why I think like I say, do we get over or under concerned with consent, and actually is consent the real issue, or is it actually the outcomes? And so to go on to that, I don't know if you know, but your CSP subs have gone up relatively large amount in the last year. Does anybody know why that is? Anybody read enough in Frontline to actually be able to say? Yeah, something about a claim. So, and you can Google this and look it up. Someone performed a grade 5 nip on someone's neck, and they were instantly paralysed. Couldn't get up off the bed. you know, pretty horrendous story. And that obviously claim for that is going to be millions and millions of pounds, which was meant that obviously to get PLI again for all of you as members, that the cost of that is going to go up and going to go up significantly. And again, the issue is not, well, that person consented to that. It doesn't matter whether they consented to that. It is that outcome that's kind of the important thing. So they consented, well, I don't know exactly, but I believe they consented to having the treatment. But obviously, if they'd have said, you know, that you're going to be paralysed at the end of it, obviously they wouldn't have done. So in that respect, it doesn't make a lot of difference. And I was up at the CSP last week, and we were talking a little bit about PLI and PLI claims. And can anyone guess what the most PLI claims are from CSP? What we pay out for as an organisation? Any kind of, I don't have a few guesses. What do you think the most likely thing? I'll just give you a clue because of the big claim. So it's going to be, I don't know if I've got them in the right order or not, but it's going to be negligent treatment. So when treatment's applied inappropriately. And again, so consent is an issue there. Inappropriate exercises, you believe that's the top 4 thing that gets paid out for? So people given inappropriate exercises. Burns. It's a bit scary. I mean, like I said, I practiced for quite a long time in the NHS. So, well, electrotherapy. Scary stuff. People burn people with wheat packs. You know, and you think, and I can't remember ever getting close to burning anyone with any electrotherapy. Not that I don't know if you use it here. I certainly used it a lot less than I did at the start of my career.
There was an incident going back donkey's years. For those that remember the ultraviolet lights, they could switch between infrared and ultraviolet.
Yeah. So
you put somebody under what you thought was the infrared lamp for 20 minutes, and actually it was on ultraviolet. That wasn't me, by the way. But that's sort of normally when the burns donkeys used to go. That was normally cool.
That still happens. Not in the NHS, private practitioners. That scarily enough still happens. And so, you know, as the CSP, as the organisation, you know, we're liable for them. And then the other one is misdiagnosis, so anything that's been missed. And so, you know, there's that claim that actually, and obviously depending on what it is, you've got ranging from, you know, nice simple misdiagnosis, someone's taken longer to heal, to quarter equine practice being missed, that type of thing. But again, I suppose why I'm raising this is the issue is not around the consent here, it's the issue around the outcome from this. It's important. And so that whether that consent is there or not hasn't made any difference to the outcomes in this. But I know we're talking about it as a department and as an issue for you as practicing physios. So does anybody read their HCPC guidelines? Has anybody done a bit of work before this? No HCPC guidelines, CSP guidelines on this? Okay. So what do you think the HCPC guidelines on consent say? Anyone have a guess? Kind of, but there's one line. So I can't remember how many guidelines there are in the HCPC for registrant physios, but there is literally one. 2.6, understand the importance of and be able to obtain informed consent. And that is it. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad, but that then doesn't say what informed consent is. It just says you have to be important and be able to obtain it. CSP is a little bit more on this. So, you know, this is a big old document. So and this is what you need to go away and probably have a look at as a department afterwards and kind of have a little think about.
It's on the table.
So you're going to know the case law in a minute? Okay. So it's the practice of development 078. If you've already got it, you don't need to know that. I mean, considering there's one line on it in the HCPC, there's a 35-page CSP consent and where it should be and what it should be for. Let me just see. Okay. So there's a lot of information about that. And when I was doing the HCPC talk with the network, well, I was on the tube in London once and I saw this kind of play come up You know, when you're going on the tube and there's all those little, now they've got screens at the side of the tube and they kind of different information. And I saw this play and I thought, oh, that's kind of perfect, really, because it gives that definition of informed consent in there. And I thought, you know, that's actually quite nicely set it up. Permission granted in the knowledge of the possible consequences. So it's that understanding that if someone, you're asking for consent, you're getting informed consent, the person that's doing that knows what could happen as part of it. Shrinking slide.
Sorry. Pressing something.
I think you need to go back the other way a little bit, otherwise I don't know if you'll be able to read it, because the next slide's quite busy. And then the CSP give a bit more, because there is some case law about this. So, you know, very simply, what is consent is around case law. And case law changed in the last few years. I think it was Montgomery versus Lanarkshire was the case law that changed it again around what consent truly is and isn't. And it's basically on, it is on what is in your record and whether it shows that, you know, there is that. And again, it's that going back to that line about the possible consequences of the actions you're doing. So has that person got that informed consent from what's done? And there's a list of 3 things. So basically, they must have capacity, must be given voluntarily, and then, yeah, they must be able to have all the information they need to be able to make that decision. And that's the key thing. If consent is ever an issue, then it's going to be around that. So again, it's how you record consent. Is do they have all that information? You can come into the treatment cubicle. Do you pass that test?
You've not given them the information.
Yeah. So while I think you can say they're consenting to being assessed, they're certainly not consenting to be in treatment because you haven't even discussed the treatment options with them. And I don't want to make this overcomplicated because it's very easy to make this overcomplicated. And whenever I worked in outpatients, my assumption was that they know they're coming in for an assessment. You know, it says very clearly on all the information they get, they're coming in for an assessment. So I felt that I didn't need to say and write consent, informed consent, whatever, that they were coming in for an assessment, because by them coming in, they are already saying, yeah, I'm coming in to see a health professional. Yeah, I understand that part of that, there's going to be something that's going to happen. That's going to involve me moving, or, you know, you're going to see a physio. There's a little bit around there. But it's around then, I think it's around the treatment that the issues are. And I think obviously from that form, you are not getting them to get informed consent about treatment. So I'm not trying to overcomplicate this. Even I can't read that. Where's that on here?
What do other departments do? They hand out something, they sign it, and then they will find something else.
I think other departments are probably very similar in that it's not probably recorded. I don't want to say well, because I'll come on to something in a second, because I don't know whether it's well or not. Because actually legally, I'll show you in a minute what you have to do legally. But I think it's mixed. And I think people often do a very similar thing where they'll try and get it at that start, or consent to assessing treatment, or that, you know, that kind of thing. But that's not really, that does not pass the criteria here. And it doesn't pass that dictionary definition about, you know, the knowing the consequences of your actions. However, technically, and when I say technically, not legally, there's only a very few things that you need signed consent for. I can't remember quite what it is, but it's nothing physio-wise. But the kind of guidance from the CSP is that any invasive procedure should have written consent. And like I say, but that's kind of it's best practice, not the law. The law doesn't say that. So even though acupuncture, I imagine, like saying, do you all do signed consent for acupuncture with a form?
Yeah.
Legally, you don't need to do that. But I think, you know, I've done that for many, many years for acupuncture. And I think that's a good idea. And it's very simple because you have your consent form with your contraindications. So, and they've signed it. And so it's very clear that they have read that, signed it, understood it, or whether they've read it or not, it's a different story. But they've signed it to say they've read it. And you've got very clear that they've understood the potential there. That's all right, I'm James.
So I'm CSP.
Yeah.
So we get.
Yeah.
And we get written consent.
Yeah.
Is that legally needed?
I don't think so, no.
But we now go paperless.
Yeah.
So does it have to be signed consent, or can it just be, you know, it as the parent consented and you tick it on system one? That's what we're using. So instead of having to sign.
CSP guidelines are that written consent for anything invasive is the best,
Right.
and would be the best. So I would personally, I wouldn't go against that. While legally you don't need it, I think if that's what we're saying is best practice in an organisation, then it'll still be a signed consent would be the best. And I think that does protect you in that you have then, if that consent form gives them possible contraindications, gives them, you know, what's going to go on, and then that means they can make that choice.
And also there's a bit of like objections that you shouldn't be doing this there and then. So you should let them go away with all the information and then bring them back. That's something the CSP is saying that's definite as well. They can't take all that information on there and there, or
I don't know is the answer. Is there anything from the injection therapy group that would, that's probably might be my place to look, because I can't remember exactly, it's a big old document just to look through, so it'd be worth having a chat through. The general bit in there is anything invasive for in contact. I don't know if it said you should go in and think about it. I certainly did with acupuncture, but I don't know if that was because that just gave me a bit of time to think about what I was going to do next time, rather than being rushed into it. So you're then kind of doing it at a rush, trying to quick sign this and then get them in and out, and then it's all a bit of a. So I would do that, but it wasn't because I thought that was better for consent. I thought that's better to make sure. Probably I got my head right, thinking right, actually, what's wrong with them? What can we do? So you know, so I'm not following just a script of acupuncture. I'm actually thinking, what am I going to do? So,
It's been led by my procedures. There's been good things about that. They can then consent that day and you go away and bring them back. I think it's not that injection.
Yeah, I and like I say, I don't know the answer to that because legally you don't need to. But it would, but like I say, if you've got written consent, then that's what we say best practice. But whether there should be a you know, that kind of cooling off period, have a read through the paper and see. But I'd be interested to see. Well, I'd probably have a read through the guidelines. Pick them up, then we might, you know, we could possibly look at them anyway. On consent, see if there's anything in there or not, because I just don't know the answer to that. To be completely honest, there's something in there. But it'd be interesting to see what the injection therapy. There's an injection therapy group, isn't it? Yeah. See what they actually said and see what they feel as a group is best. I mean, like I say, you don't necessarily have to do it because legally you don't. But it's just kind of supporting you. So if anyone ever came back to you and said, challenged you on it, you would say, well, actually, I've done this, and that. But I feel like we are getting a little bit over the top of this. You know, that's my worry with it, is that, and like I say, working with the doctor I work with, who I got really well with, still friendly with, you know, he would just, you know, just do it, and that was normal for that. And we go over to the, how many times have you rung a GP and said, can you inject a patient? I think they've got this, and they'll book them into the clinic, and they'll just come in and say, oh yeah, the physio says you've done this, says you want me to do subacromially, yeah, and they just do it. You know, they haven't really even assessed them. They've just gone what we've told them. You know, and you do worry if that ever went wrong. But what are the risks involved with injection going on? There is risk, but they're you know, relatively small compared to surgery, for example. Yeah.
What about should they be written?
So this is in the guidance, and I've got a feeling that again they don't have to be, but the best practice guidance is that we'd advise it is. Okay. It does. I don't know whether we can get a briefing paper up on here a bit of the way through, and then have a look. But there is that little section on. There is a section on it, and it does say, it does quote the law on what you have to do, and what you don't have to legally get.
It's funny, so in my previous job, we always had to get sign. But then here it is in the UK. But then someone said actually in the court it doesn't stand up.
I mean, I think. Sorry, Karen.
There's a whole kind of
and I think that it's that kind of, I'm going to go into are my notes legal, that court of law thing. You're not going to, or I don't think you are, and I've never seen it. We don't go to court because of our notes. I haven't seen anyone since I've joined the CSP or ever heard of anyone being in front of a court of law because they're note keeping. You might be in front of the HCPC because of your note keeping. I have seen people go as witnesses to court and they've had to explain their notes because of but again, that's because of the outcome of a treatment that's gone on. It's not because their notes don't have consent in, it's because the outcome has been, not acceptable, or potentially negligent or whatever it's been, but that person is making a claim. I think for you, there's that, you don't want someone then accusing you of doing something. And if you've got a written consent form that says this is quite clearly what's going to be going on, then that would protect you in that respect. But again, go and see GP, go and see any other health professional. They're almost certainly not going to get consent for any examination. And like I said, yes, I'll put, have a read of the document. And the CSP actually is I've got to say the website is not great. It's not the easiest to find stuff. It's not great. It's not terrible. And that's probably unfair, but it's not always the easiest thing to find. So I can't remember how I don't think I put in consent and found it. Or did I put in briefing papers and then it led me to a list? And then, it's not necessarily that kind of straightforward, but you can find stuff there. And the one thing the CSP does is it's got lots of documents there. And they give quite a lot of information about it, about lots of different things as well. So HCPC. Again, going back to that comment about court of law, I deal with HCPC cases. You can look them up online if you want. I don't know if anyone's interested. Ever done it? Has anyone done it? Yeah. Do you enjoy it?
Yeah, it's quite interesting.
It's fascinating. I sometimes do it and have a little look through. You can scroll down for physios. You can just do generally what goes in front of the HCPC. A little bit scary, some of the stuff that's in there. It's what people have done. Not always physios. Physios are generally pretty good, but there's some interesting stuff in there. And I've been to HCPC before and sat in and watched a case go on, a 5-day case, which was around kind of note keeping, which this would fall into. I haven't seen consent raised as an issue from the HCPC. I haven't seen anyone go to the HCPC and say, consent was not obtained in an appropriate way. Which is interesting because they are so hot on note keeping. So if you, referred someone to HCPC or someone was referred to HCPC about note keeping and there's evidence that note keeping has not been good enough, they would certainly look into that and scrutinise that. But they don't seem to be worried about consent in the same way. Possibly because there's not that kind of legal backing of it, what you actually have to get consent for. I don't know, but it's not something that appears in HCPC cases. So again, makes me query whether we are, are we overly worried about it as physios as a whole group rather than about compared to our other NHS colleagues. And so so that's not something I see, but like I say, note keeping is and they're really on note keeping, and note keeping ones that get referred to HCPC. When you've had a look through it, it's literally like on patient A, you didn't record. Sometimes you kind of think they're almost a little bit petty, and I'm not quite sure how they've got to HCPC. Like you didn't record treatment appropriately, or you didn't record. And it literally be like words that are missed off rather than kind of whole. There are some where, unfortunately, where people have not recorded notes for a period of time. But you can be quite kind of picky with that, but consent doesn't seem to be an issue for them. And again, that goes back to that point about, are my notes legal? Are your, like I say, I don't see people going like that. I know people who've had to go. I know people who had to go to High Court and explain their notes, put what was in their notes about something that's happened. I can't remember how long ago it was, but it was literally, I can't remember what the time limit is for you to make a claim, but it was literally like a few days before they made the claim, that before the time limit ran out, they made the claim, then it takes however long, gets up into the High Court, and the person had to go up there. And all he could say was what was on his notes, because he didn't remember the person, but they were alleging that, and it wasn't against him, it was against a treatment package that had gone on, and he was just the physio that had been involved in it. And no one quizzed him and said, well, what, you haven't put this in your notes, or, you know, your notes aren't very good. They were just like, what can you remember about the patient? And he went, well, my notes say this. What did you do to the patient? Well, my notes say this. What was the outcome? Well, my notes say this. You know, there was no criticism of his notes. It was just around what actually was written there. And so there was nothing that came out of it. I don't know whether his notes were brilliant or terrible, but there was nothing in it that was around his notes. And so I think for you, you need to come up with whatever works for you as a department and that's sensible, realistic. Obviously, we have got the guidelines from the CSP and the HCPC that it needs to be informed consent, but I do think you need to think about what, you know, if someone's come in, you are giving them assessment and an exercise program, then I think that, you know, well, I suppose the question is, do you think that what you're doing now is enough or not? Not sure about that consent form right at the start, but I think it's very easy to explain an exercise program to someone and quickly know that. But anything more, and again, it's that invasive stuff, injections, acupuncture, I definitely think written consent is the way to go. But read the guidelines and see what you say, because there isn't this is exactly what you have to do, because it isn't an area where there is a very definitive, this is it, like I said, because there are other health professionals and what they're doing. Audit, you know, I don't know how you audit your notes at the moment, again, and how whether you've got a box on your audit form that says consent, and then you just tick it and you go back and say, actually, that you didn't do it on this day, or you do, or that form. But again, it's just going through audit and making sure that you're thinking about it, think about how you're doing it. Are you recording it? How are you recording it? Is it at the right time or not? And that's probably it from my point of view, because I really just wanted to see what you wanted to ask me and give me some questions on and get some kind of your thoughts on it, really.
It might not be the best person then, like notes, guidelines, but another question again around in papers.
Yeah.
Is that you can share so in the drug history, we might write CGP referral check to patient. Is that adequate, or see customer report history? You might say CGP, so if it's somewhere else within the system, we might just say where we've looked at it and checked. We might not list it again.
So you,
time.
Yeah. I'd be interested to know. I don't know is the answer, but what I would say is that something you can access at that point?
Yeah.
So you can just click on a box. I was having a little look at it earlier, actually. You can click on a box and that will give you that information.
Yeah. Always, but sometimes, yeah.
I don't see. Yeah. 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 I don't see that as being a problem. If you can say you've done it and you maybe have said check with the patient and there isn't any changes in that, because again you're just duplicating stuff in an MDT notes. We wouldn't write. You know, every person that sees that patient wouldn't do another subjective assessment and go through and say, well, what's your past medical history? I know it's on the screen, but what's your past medical history? Yeah. And you know, working in fracture clinic as an example, I work quite closely alongside the GP, where I was taking on quite a lot of responsibility and seeing some of the things on my own. I wouldn't go back in and we'd have the MIU notes. I wouldn't go then back in and seeing that patient on my own and saying, what's your medical history? What So I think there's, as long as you can access it, and then I don't see an issue. I think like I say, I'm not, because HCPC guidelines worth having a look at, but they are literally like 2.4, or that was 2.6, must get a 4%. 2.4, must understand how to do a subjective assessment. It's kind of quite, it's not really specific in that, but I think that I don't know whether, because I think electronic patient notes are quite relatively new, aren't they? I mean, they've been around years and years, but they're not something that everyone is doing yet. But whether there is any briefing papers from the CSP. But I think as long as that information is accessible at that point and you've checked it and you've written that you've checked it, then I don't see it, because otherwise you are just and what we don't want to do in the NHS, I was there, was duplicate work, because that's wasting time and resources that we don't, as you know, we don't have. So I don't see an issue with that. I think, we have got, and that's, I think, the problem with this is, around anything like this, is that common sense has to be part of it as well. And I don't want you to think that that's been lost. That's my worry with doing this kind of stuff, is that we lose that kind of common sense approach and actually get kind of overdone.
What we write, so if we've got our written consent, how do we actually record that in a way that proves we've done that without writing a paragraph?
Well, again, I don't know, and I don't know because I don't know, but because I'd go back to be blunt, does it really matter? Because actually, you're not going to be done in front of an HCPC or in front of the court, because your notes don't. You're going to be the only way that's going to happen is if something went wrong, and then someone makes a claim against you. And the same with that. I'm sure I dealt with someone, or know, well, I know of people who do, punch people's lives. Unfortunately, there's a risk of that happening. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen. And again, that is almost certainly always going to get a claim and some kind of recompense, I would imagine, for it. But you have signed a consent form that says you give consent, and you understand that if you do that, then there is a risk of that happening. But because you've signed that consent, doesn't mean that therefore you we still are an organisation, that is the outcome of that statement. So I don't have an issue with, but I think it should be at that point when you are about to deliver the treatment. So it should be that, it should be something around, I would think common sense would say, or something around, where's my favourites? Explanation of treatment given and possible outcomes, or something like that. I think something around that is quite clearly that you've done that. And the patient safety when you get into the cases. I was talking a little bit about this at the network. There's someone who did pulmonary rehab, and I have to get them written consent. Do pulmonary rehab with someone because they couldn't do it in the gym when they were doing that. I was like, no, it's not really a drop, but I think something around that is around when you do more treatments that there is a potential outcome for. There's an important potential to not result, that's what we're talking about. But also, a change in treatment outcomes. I'm worried to make this very difficult. So I do think we need to think about it as a group and think about what actually works in the work process.
Going back to the kind of bringing it up in court, and obviously you won't be taken to court for not having consent. If you were to,
I've never seen anyone. I should probably say anyone, but I've never seen anyone.
But say someone's taken to court because one of the bad outcomes happened, would it not be worse if then consent was not recorded? If they haven't recorded any kind of informed consent to treatment?
So the payout is based on the outcome of the treatment. So so in effect, it doesn't, as far as I'm aware, I've not seen that ever being an issue. So the issue is around, it's not kind of like, I'm trying to think of an example, but right, let's say someone acupunctures you and you burn, let's use burn, electrotherapy burn. There's a burn, it's there, you've got a photo of it, it happened, fair enough, it happened, it shouldn't have happened, but it did happen. The payout for that we will offer is X amount of money. I haven't, or I'm aware of, and I can probably ask one of my colleagues who does a lot more PLI claims, heard that, well, actually, they didn't obtain written consent to use that electrotherapy, therefore they're going to get more money. I'm not aware of that. And like with the claim that's going to go through, that's going to be millions. No one has even quizzed on. I think I don't even know whether consent was obtained. I've not seen anything about it. There's lots of news stories about it. There's you know, one when it happened relatively soon. There's one that's happened more recently, a kind of follow up to that. No one has mentioned consent in it. It's all about that person and the treatment and the outcome from that. So my opinion would be that that's not an issue. You know, that it's worse if you haven't obtained it.
We did have some and they were questioning the outcome. But they did actually question the consent.
Yeah.
They said, I don't think enough information of how, you know, exactly what was going on.
Yeah.
And that was,
Yeah. Well, no, the only rules are the Montgomery versus Lanarkshire, which is this, you know, the what is informed consent and the bits afterwards. You know, that is what the legal framework is. You know, and that is what legally consent is around. And Montgomery versus Lanarkshire, I can't quite remember, but it's not around someone in an outpatient setting getting a treatment. You know, it's something massive around consent. You know, it's not around that kind of that issue. Sorry.
And we
You're
don't
gonna carry on.
have them asking, we got asked, have all the information. How far can you go on that? Because patients don't really know what to ask until you've given them the information. So
Yeah, it is. It is. It's like I say, case law makes it kind of feel a bit impossible, I think, because you know that line about giving all the information they ask for. But actually, if they don't ask a lot, and you're doing, I don't know, lumbar spine mobilization, yeah, how many times? I am not aware of a lumbar spine mobilization where, you know, grade 1 to 4 or grade 5, but a lumbar spine mobilization where anyone has, as far as I'm aware, you know, there's been a massive issue around that. You know, you have your patient who gets up and says, I'm a bit sore, and comes back the next week and says, actually, I was a bit sore after that, you know. But then actually, you would probably, well, I think you would probably explain that when you're going to do a mobilization, we're going to, you know, move the joints to your back. Okay, are we actually moving the joints to the back or not? That's different. That's another another kind of debate. But you know, what we're trying to do is get everything moving, get everything working better. Hopefully, you'll get up, have more flexibility. We'll check your range of movement again. If it's getting better, then we'll do it again. You know, and if it makes you worse, just let me know and we'll stop. And they come back the next week and say I was a bit sore afterwards. You say, okay, well, if it made you sore, we'll probably do a little bit less, or we'll do something else. And you know, I imagine that you've explained that. It's just, again, and I don't know, but you know, I can't say hand on heart definitely, but I don't know anyone where they want to score over, you know, a grade 2 L4 mobilisation. So I think, you know, that's that, and I think you could quite easily say, you know, mobilisations explained to patients, you know, consent obtained. If you're really worried about that, well, like I say, is the outcome that really seems to be the thing that happens. Mm-hmm.
classes.
Yeah.
In terms of is that something we should do treatment?
What do you think? Yeah, well, I'm not, I don't mind your form, but I don't think it does exactly what you want it to do. So I don't think it says that person is consenting to a treatment package. I think it's saying they consent to be assessed. You could maybe do it so it's consent around an exercise program, but I don't think it consents to them having a treatment. Yeah, I think so. I think that you've given them the information they required to know what potentially could happen, and then they've come back and said, yeah, I'm happy with that. I'm trying to think what I used to do when we used to do our rehab classes, whether we signed them up to it, and I think we gave them an information sheet about it. So that was not because of consent, that was just so they knew what the expectations of the class were really, and what was the likely outcomes, what we were going to do. But that would have meant that they would have understood that. But what I suppose that what I'd maybe challenge back on is how many people have you come to an exercise class and then come back to you and said, I'm really terrible, that was completely unacceptable, I didn't realise what was going to go on exercise class.
I think the biggest worry with an exercise class is maybe like if people fell and had an injury or something like that.
Yeah.
What would be the case then? Like,
And well, the worry is always that someone going to, collapse, and then how do you manage that situation?
Yeah.
When that patient starts looking a little bit.
You might.
Well, I know. Like we're saying, and actually, there is like I say, you've got to have a common sense about this, and that's the risk of going too much into kind of what is legal, what's not. It's actually because like I say, for consent and what you have to get is quite limited in that. But it is around. So I think it is around common. You have to use the guidelines, but then also use a bit of common sense around it. Because, like I said before, actually, legally, you only need. I don't know if we can get the briefing paper up, but it's very specific to what you actually need to get written consent for from a legal perspective. But HCPC guidelines express we need informed consent. It just needs that people need to know that. Possible consequences, I think, is the important thing. So they literally have explained that to them. But I mean, I'm getting into a different thing, but if someone comes into an exercise class, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm so sad. The cable was kind of looped round of the extension cables, kind of laid it down so that no one would fall over it. Again, you're not signing them to say, well, actually, there's a cable that's, if you fall over a cable in the exercise class, then, tough, that you signed your consent form. But and if someone falls over, we have people in exercise classes, not with me, I'm not saying it was their fault or not, but, have faults and do that kind of thing and go a bit off on their feet and then have to get MIU to come down and see them, and then MIU will come down, and, and all that kind of stuff. But actually, we didn't really have major issues with it. They do have to kind of have a common sense approach as well. Yeah, if you want to, yeah.
Just the consent one?
Yeah, just that.
The CSP.
The CSP one, yeah. Good. Anything else? Very good. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's spot on. It doesn't. And like I say, if we're looking at protecting you as individuals, like I say, even though I don't say HCPC legal cases where this is reported in, but that's very true. He cannot make. You said it was a he, didn't you? Yeah. He cannot make a decision about whether to accept a treatment program or not based on that sheet. He's probably the only person who's read it, because I know with acupuncture, you give it to people and you'd say, well, take that away and read it. Because and they'd be like, no, just sign it out. And we had a tick box for yes, no questions, and they would just tick no for everything. And there were 2 questions that you had to tick yes for. And I can't remember which 2 they were actually, but because I used to say to people, look, you do need to read it because there are 2 questions here that aren't just no. Basically, by ticking no to those 2, they basically said they couldn't have acupuncture. So, but yeah, how many people just did that? How do But from our point of view, you have protected yourself. You have done that. Yeah, let's see. There is a bit about when. Oh, yeah, I'm going to reverse this line. So there we go. I did remember that.
I'm just going to talk them through.
Yeah, so no, so I was going to say, so that's about negligence. However, the CSP PLI payout is actually, if something has gone wrong, say that person is considered to treatment, let's use that as one, then this could be. We're getting very technical. Yeah, that's a good point actually, and it is around significant changes. If you do something significant, getting from myself. I'm reading and going through it. What am I trying to look up? How's your memory of
Was that injections or women's health?
Oh, it's the legal where you have to legally.
Yeah.
That's probably a 35-page document. Try and find the one you want. Right, let me start. Copying that first bit. Oh, sorry. Yeah, here we go. I looked at that page. So there you go. When is written consent actually needed? Mental Health Act, Human Fertilisation and Embryology Act, Human Tissue Act, Department of Health and subsequently CSP recommends written consent for these things. And so I don't know how many we do of those anyway. So legally, there's no obligation. Department of Health, CSP recommends for those. How many of us do where treatment is complex, involves significant risk? How many of us are involved in general regional anesthesias? And so, like I say, in physiotherapy, this is where we think that good practice should be written. So, it's quite specific. We've got limits where the CSP guidelines can be taken and what we have to do. We go back up. Do we do any of those? And that's Department of Health and CSP recommendation. Yeah, unless you want to show them again on the screen. I'm just wondering whether any of anyone
It's not clear on the screen.
I don't know. I suppose I can think of maybe ESPs doing spinal injections. Would that be where that complex? I do know it's got some of our colleagues who do kind of spinal blocks and that kind of thing. But I don't, injection therapy is certainly not under there. But yeah, so I suppose it's just to say that actually that's what the kind of legal thing you have to do is, and CSP guidance is around that. There's a little bit then about intimate examinations and it not being mandatory.
And then consent for information sharing. All that a little bit. We asked once when we can't. Does that something you should ask regularly? Because they might try to get around by consent to happen, or do you just it's up to them if they want to tell what they said first time?
I don't know. Is the answer to that one. If you ask me, I'm good at employment law. This is information sharing is getting a little bit outside my expertise, certainly. Have a read through and see whether that gives you the information you need. But yeah, that's not my area of expertise. But mine would be just the same as you, reading that and making a decision based on the information there. So have a read through and see what you think. Good. Anything else? I'm happy to answer anything just more CSP related. Employment law would be easier. But anything, about anything else you kind of have got any kind of things in, if anyone's got any queries.
Can I ask you about bank pay?
Yes.
Should it be higher than existing fully employed
Should it be?
staff?
Is that my personal opinion on how much bank should get paid? So are you talking about someone who is employed under a contract and then does bank work as well, or someone who is just a bank member of staff?
Just a bank
Member of staff. I mean, that's up to the organisation to decide and set. Well, it can be lots of things, but it can be for them to set a rate for and decide what they want it to be as the rate, whether they want to enhance that to make it more attractive, whether they want to keep it low. So some people pay bottom of the band and stuff. That's what you get the bottom of the band. When I used to work in Exeter, some of my nursing colleagues there, who were contracted and then were on the bank, they would get the text probably a week before saying, can you do this shift? And you get paid this amount of money. They knew that if they waited a few more days, they'd get another text, which would say, we still need this shift filling. Can you get this amount of money? And it was a bit of a game. So who got the kind of text in first, because they were getting desperate and they didn't want to go to agency rates to cover it. So yeah, there's not agenda for change. It should be the rate for the job. So if it's a band 6 post, you should get paid at band 6. But where you get paid within that band 6 could be dependent on where they set their rates. So some people will set it midpoint through the band and say, well, 6, we need a band 6 to do this shift, day, whatever. We'll pay the midpoint. And some people will pay bottom and say, we'll pay you at the bottom.
I thought it was meant to be an enhanced rate because no sickness and no annual leave pay.
No, you're a 0 hours. In effect, if you're a bank, you're a 0 hours contract worker, and no, you have no employment rights. You are not an employee. You get no sick pay. You don't necessarily get more. You might get more, and you can justify it by that way, saying, well, we'll pay more because of that. But there's no 0 hours workers. In effect, anyone on a bank contract has no, and it's as very, very limited to any kind of employment issues.
So even if you sort of work for longer than 2 years, there's no claim then for something like employment rights.
So if you've continually worked on the bank for 2 years, are you talking about fixed term contracts, or are you talking about just someone who's worked on the bank and just picking up shifts as and when?
Work regularly. With no gap longer than a month.
So you'd have to look into it exactly, but my initial thoughts are no. If you do a fixed term contract for a period of time, 4 years, and that can be doing it for 2 weeks, gets extended 2 weeks. After 4 years, it becomes a permanent contract. Or if you're doing 6 months, whatever you do it. But for someone who's just picking up shifts here and there, then no, there's no. My wife's a teacher, and she does supply teaching, fits in well with the family now and my work, and she is 0 hours. They can ring her up and say, can you come in today, tomorrow? She got a text this morning. She's like, oh no, I don't want to work today. And it was one of her friends, but she said, it's like, but then they can book her in for next week, and then they can ring her up and say, actually, we don't need you now. the day before. I mean, generally they're pretty good and she works, but that's the reality of it. You have no stability and nothing like that. If you want a bit more specific advice, I can give you some. You can have a chat with me afterwards. But I might have a few little hints and tips. But yeah, no, as an employee, you've got nothing. Good. All right. Anything else? That's all right. Yes.
I think it worked quite well. We had Rosie was quite happy. She said, "Good question, Lucy. For your question." Okay, so that
It's
ends.
recorded now, but so
It is, but hold on.